Hello, everybody. I'm Craig Bowden. I'm your Marine vet for Freedom, out on another lovely patrol. Um, just doing the job that I got hired to do. Working security for an okay company. Hours are kind of crappy. Obviously, I'm coming to you at, let's see, 3 a.m. So, lots of fun. Basically, it entails driving around in multiple circles through parking structures where pretty much absolutely nothing happens. But the point of this isn't to, entertain you with my driving. It's actually just to allow you guys to see my face and kind of get to know me a little bit better. Um, and to just have another method of getting the truth across. Um, it's kind of a scary thing with everything that's going on right now in the United States. Anybody who's paying attention to the news knows that there's been massive shootings. We've had 5 mass shootings in just the Obama presidency. That's a little bit more than one a year on average. You've got the Sikh temple shooting in Wisconsin. You've had the Aurora, Colorado shooting at the theater. Just recently, the Sandy Hook Elementary School shooting in Connecticut and Newton. These are some pretty rough times that we live in. One of the things that I kind of want to talk about today is preparing yourself, because it's looking like we may have a pretty good fight on our hands. Um, I'm not one that has ever advocated violence. I've seen war, done with it. I don't want to see it again. But bare minimum, we're in for one hell of a political fight, if not a physical fight. So one of the things I'm going to recommend is that you go ahead and go buy yourself a firearm before you can't. The reason why I suggest that you go and get one right now before you're unable to is because there has actually been a massive push on several of the liberal avenues trying to um, kind of force not only President Obama's hand, but our Congress and our Senate. And there's actually individual members of the Senate and House of Representatives that are calling for bans on high-capacity magazines, on their so-called assault weapons, and semi-automatic weapons as well. Now, the best way to kind of defeat this is to actually get grandfathered in, because if you already own, then they can't ban something that you already have. So I would highly, highly recommend that you go and purchase your firearms now. My typical suggestion is to have something you can hunt with, a long rifle. Uh, Personally, in my, stack, I have a Remington 700 and the 7mm. That's been my rifle of choice for kind of the medium long distance shots for hunting and stuff like that. Um, my personal feeling towards a sidearm is a 40 caliber. I run a Springfield XD. Now, unfortunately, at work, I have to use a Glock 9mm. So, not the best, but hey, what can you do? The reason why I suggest to go and get something in 40 caliber or even a 45 is because you're going to actually have some stopping power when it comes to your personal carry and defense. Uh, the 9mm just doesn't quite pack the punch, and unless you're a decent marksman, you're not necessarily going to be putting a target down. Learned this from experience, so take my word for it. You're going to want to get a 40-45. 1911 is good. Springfield makes some really good firearms. Colt, you know, just your regular old name brands. Now, for home defense, I highly recommend a 12 gauge shotgun. The reason for this is because most often you're probably going to be experiencing, if you do experience a burglary, it's going to be in the middle of the night if you actually run into the burglar. The reason for this is obviously the cover of night. Now, if you're shooting up out of bed, you've got to understand that you are going to be tired. So sighting in isn't really going to be, that much of a big deal. On top of that, your adrenaline's also going to be pumping. So that's why I suggest a shotgun, because you kind of get a little bit more spread with your round. Accuracy isn't as big of a deal. And when you're talking about the actual shot, as long as you go with something that is more of a spread shot as opposed to say a slug, you're also not going to have wall penetration. So this is especially vital if you have other family members in other rooms. It's just a good thing to have. The other thing, I would recommend that you go and get a sport rifle. Now, I've commented before on why I call them sport rifles. It's because typically they are used for target practice and sport shooting. They rarely are used to commit assaults, so I hate the way that they kind of choose to call them assault weapons, because more than likely in an assault you're going to have a knife, a baseball bat, crowbar, in many cases a flashlight, those larger mini mags. A lot of people like to keep those longer flashlights in their vehicles. But knives, definitely. Knives are a big one when it comes to assault. But you don't hear them saying that knives are assault weapons, which is kind of funny because the majority of assaults in the United States are caused by knives. Or, well, not caused by knives. Let me take that back. They're caused by the person using a knife. Another thing we really do need to kind of do it when it comes to the preparedness with this, I recommend having a pretty decent loadout when it comes to this. I run probably about 100 rounds with my Remington 700. I run, on average, I have anywhere between 100 and 500 shotgun shells for my 12 gauge, and they vary. I have some buckshot, I have some birdshot, I have slugs, I have high velocity slugs. It just kind of depends on what I plan on using it for. When it comes to your pistol, your sidearm, I recommend just having a few hundred rounds, and make sure that you are target practicing with stuff made for target practicing, and don't be using the really expensive rounds. I actually had a friend of mine that was using some expensive HydroShock rounds that were about $50 a box, so about $1 a round, and you don't want to use that to go into your target shooting with. But for your loadout, your actual defense, I would highly, highly recommend that you use either HydroShock or some other form of hollow point rounds. And I also suggest having no less than 5 magazines for the pistol. Granted, you're not going to carry all 5 at the same time, but you can keep 1 in the gun, 2 in your box, and 2 on your belt. And that just ensures that if you do end up coming across a situation where you may need to use that weapon, that you do have kind of a backup when it comes to the ammunition that you may use. That's just kind of a little bit of a suggestion that I have. It is important that you kind of do these things, and you'll have to excuse me, I'm going to be blacked out for a minute. So you'll just have to pay attention to me as I talk. See, in my job, they want accountability for where we're going, so I have to have these random points scattered throughout the building while parking structure. So, anyways, back to what we were saying. I also advise that you get range time. A lot of people, they buy a gun and think that that's all they really need to do. And that couldn't be further from the truth. You need to be proficient in the use of that firearm. And the only way to get proficient is to practice your draw, your stance, and I'm going to be doing some videos on that later on, just so that if you don't really know how to draw, how to stance, that you'll be able to do it effectively. Now, the other thing that I'm going to recommend is that you go over the safety rules often. Not only yourself, but your family, your children, especially if you have children, so that they understand that it's a real deal. This is not something to play around with, and so I'll break it down pretty simple. The Marine Corps uses 4 basic safety rules. You have, and the way that I remember them is treat, never, keep, keep. That's treat every weapon as if it were loaded. Never point a weapon at anything you do not intend to shoot. Keep your fingers straight off the trigger until you're ready to fire, and keep your weapon on safe until you're ready to fire. For obvious reasons. If you follow these safety rules, you can actually defeat the narrative of what the liberals try to do, because you're being responsible. You're being a good gun owner. Now, a couple other things that I would suggest is that you also make sure that you store it properly. The last thing we need is another accidental shooting. Some kid deciding to play with dad's shotgun type thing. It doesn't go over too well. And so, please, you use common sense and treat your weapons as what they are. They are weapons. They are a tool to cause death. That is what they're designed for. And so that's what you need to treat them like. That's why they need to be locked up. That's why they need to be treated at all times as if they were loaded. If you always treat it as if it's loaded, then you're never going to have the gun go off without you actually shooting that weapon. It needs to be an intentional thing. So what I plan on doing with this video series is I'm actually going to start showing how to prep, how to make certain things, how to store. I also want to do a little bit on some tactical training that you can follow along with, because frankly I just don't see the vast majority of people as being ready. And so you can kind of follow along and get a gist of the kind of gear that you'll need, the proper ways to fire, and actually walking you through some scenarios. This is going to help a lot, and this is just one more thing that Marine Vet for Freedom is going to be doing to maintain the individual liberty of the American citizen. We need to be ready. You don't know whether you're going to need to defend yourself against the government, or whether you're going to end up needing to defend yourself against a home invader. The way that people are these days, it just seems that violence is becoming more and more common. So it's best to kind of be at the ready. I would rather have it and not need it than need it and not have it. I mean, I've been working at this job for a while now, And, armed security, not a dang thing's happened. Not even a fender bender to report in the parking structure. I mean, I kind of work graveyards, so not too many cars driving around at that hour. But the whole purpose is, you know, if something were to happen, I am prepared, and I do know how to use what I have. And that's why I'm asking you to prepare as well. The best thing that we can do is just be prepared. It's kind of the whole Boy Scout motto. And it's always best just to prepare for the worst and hope for the best. Will a natural disaster ever happen? Who knows? Is the world going to end? My personal feelings on it, I doubt it. I don't see the world as, coming to a close here on December 21st. Um, but you never know. There could be some kind of cataclysmic thing that does happen, solar flare that knocks out the power grid, some kind of earthquake, strange weather events, whatever have you. And if, I am a religious man, I do believe at some time we are going to see Judgment Day. I just don't think it's going to be, this year necessarily. um, but natural disasters occur, so that's why I say it's good to be prepared. When you look at the events in Hurricane Sandy, you still have people that are without power, without food, without water, that are basically relying on other people. Now, had they been prepared, they wouldn't have had to rely on other people. So that's why I just say, it's better to prepare and be as self-reliant as possible, because you don't know when help's going to get there, and you don't know if help is even going to come. Um, and even if it does, how long it's going to take before they're able to get to you. Um, Power could be out for weeks, months. So just keep prepared, keep your head up, um, and I'm going to continue doing this. I mean, I'm not what you would call a doomsday prepper. I'm what I would call a practical prepper. Just, having a couple weeks worth of food, having, a little bit of water, or at least the ability to filtrate water, things like that. And also having the ability to defend yourself, because unfortunately, as history has proven, is when there's a chaotic situation, grocery stores are empty, things like that, society tends to kind of fall apart. That's just the way that it goes. And so that's why I say it's good to be prepared. You could have marauders, bands of people coming together to try to take what you have. And so it's just best to kind of have a backup plan, and the ability to defend what you have and your family. So that's pretty much it in a nutshell. Just a couple quick comments when it does come to the Second Amendment. I do want to use a couple of analogies that you can use that are what I like to call common sense. And you can use these when you're debating one of these gun grabbers. Um, and the best one that I can really come up with is, you look at how many DUI deaths there are, people who are killed by drunk drivers. Okay. Now, the problem is not the car. The problem is the driver. The driver chose to drink. The driver chose to get in the car. Now, we don't have a national call for the banning of vehicles because of the widespread um, DUI accidents and deaths. No, we don't. You're not going to take away my car because my neighbor drank and decided to drive. So, seeing as we're law-abiding citizens, we don't break the law. We only carry the weapons for our own protection, the protection of our families, and we would only use those weapons in that regard. Others of us hunt. Others of us just like to go out and do a little bit of sport shooting, all of which are perfectly legal. But, you have one or two wackos that go and commit a crime. So it's the criminal that we need to focus on. And so just use that little common sense approach. Does a knife create a slasher? No. Does a miniskirt create a rapist? No. Does a car create a drunk driver? No. All of these are perpetrated by people. They make bad choices, evil choices, and that's what causes it. So just remember that. And I have a feeling that eventually this will kind of blow over a little bit. I mean, it's happened time and time again whenever there's been some kind of a shooting where they call for the ban of guns. Will it happen? Who knows? But just be prepared, do your research, and fight back. And that's pretty much what I've got for you today. So I'll go ahead and leave you with that. And as always, I'm Craig Bowden, and I'm your Marine Vet for Freedom. Thank you, and God bless.